Hello, I like democracy. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? Instead of having kings tell us what to do because of who their dads were or whatever, we get to tell ourselves what to do by voting on stuff. Well, technically, most democratic nations these days are actually republics, so instead of actually telling ourselves what to do, we vote for other people and then they tell us what to do. But that's still pretty cool, right? I mean, instead of having kings and aristocrats who tell us what to do, we get to elect the best people for the job through democratic elections. We select the most talented and qualified leaders who can guide the ship of state towards the best possible... Wait a minute, what the f happened? All my life I was told that democracy was the best way to protect freedom and shape societies, so why do we keep ending up with these self-serving monsters taking power through democratic means? It turns out all democratic systems are not equal, and the systems we have in place are really pretty terrible. I'm American Johnson, this is Non-Compete, and your democracy sucks. First, let's take a look at how modern democracies function. Western democracies pretty much universally use what's called the first-past-the-post voting system for selecting leaders. You know what this is. Whoever gets more than 50% of the votes is the winner. End of story. If no single candidate gets more than 50%, then there's a runoff, and now everyone only has the top two candidates from the first election to choose from. This is silly. By definition, it means that we will very often end up with a politician in office that most people don't really like very much. And this is exacerbated by the fact that voters are forced to choose incredibly conservative voting strategies in the first-past-the-post voting system. Let's use a really simple example to see just how first-past-the-post voting works. Say you work in a small office, and this office has workplace democracy, so you get to choose your own team leader. Your team has 10 people, and 3 of your teammates throw their hat into the ring. There's Susan, Chris, and Kate. Now you really trust Susan. She's smart, she's kind, she has a lot of really unorthodox novel ideas that you believe would result in some really positive change in the office. You really don't like Kate at all. You disagree with everything she says, and you think the office would be just unbearable with her in charge of your team. Chris is okay. He's not the brightest bulb in the office, but he's a nice guy, safe. Under Chris, things probably wouldn't change at all. You know that at least 3 or 4 of your fellow workers are likely to vote for Kate because they're terrible people too, which is frightening. You also know that Chris is a pretty popular guy, so he's probably going to get at least some of the votes. You're not sure how other people are going to feel about Susan though, because her ideas are pretty radically different, and that might scare some people away from voting for her. So even though you like Susan and you don't have a lot of confidence in Chris, you hold your nose and vote for Chris anyway because he's the safe choice and you are just terrified of Kate taking office. This is actually a pretty rational strategy to use in a first-past-the-post voting system, and that sucks. In the 1980s and 90s, computers and office furniture were all beige. Have you ever seen beige before? Nobody likes beige. Nobody wants beige. Beige just happens to be the color that everyone kind of hates the least. It's pretty terrible, but it's not the very worst. Nobody's so offended by beige that they can't possibly think of living with it, so it's stuck around for a really long time. Beige is not good. It is not what anyone wants, but it is sort of the least of all evils, and with first-past-the-post voting, beige is what we get most of the time and in most elections. First-past-the-post voting oversimplifies politics to the point where everyone has to basically pretend that there are only 2 options for every decision we ever make. Reality is obviously much more nuanced and more complex, so why don't we use voting systems that offer more nuance and more complexity when it comes to voter input? As far as voting systems go, I really love the Borda count, also known as ranked voting. The Borda count was named after a French guy who didn't really invent it, but it sounds kind of better than ranked voting, so let's stick with that, I guess. Within the Borda count system, voters get to rank their selections from best to worst, and points are distributed to candidates based on their ranking. This gives voters a lot more confidence in choosing people and ideas that they really believe in, and they don't have to use that conservative all eggs in one basket voting strategy that can scarcely reflect the true feeling of rational voters. This is a much better method for determining real group consensus and injecting nuance and deeper consideration into a voting decision. It gives us as voters more confidence in choosing candidates we really truly feel represent us, and allows for a wider field of candidates to compete in elections. It's just better democracy. Now, what if I told you it could be even better than that? See, there's not just a problem with how we vote for elected representatives. The whole concept of elected representatives comes with its own set of problems. What if a candidate promises to do one thing on the campaign trail, then turns around and does something completely different once they get into office? I know what you're thinking. Politicians lying in their campaign promises? That would never happen. Okay, enough coyly ironic sarcasm. It happens all the f***ing time, and it sucks. And at the very least, in theory, we should be able to vote these jerks out of office if they lie to us, but in practical reality, they get to spend years in office, building up their campaign war chests, brokering their way into ever higher echelons of power, and cementing their positions by peddling their influence to the highest bidding lobbyists. So what if we simply took away their ability to lie to us? I'll explain how in a minute, but first, let's talk about why we have representative democracies in the first place. Why don't we just vote for everything directly and cut out the politicians altogether? Well, historically, it had a lot to do with transportation and communication, just logistical stuff. We didn't have trains and cars and phones and the internet when early democracies were being developed. So if they wanted to get anything done democratically, they had to just put all their confidence in one dude and send him packing off to the Capitol or whatever to vote on their behalves. Even with our modern technology, this is still an issue. Running a society and writing and passing laws really is a lot of work. And most of us don't have the time or inclination to spend hours and hours every single day worrying about this stuff, especially not when Netflix just dropped the second season of Glow. So having elected representatives really does solve some problems, even though it creates other problems. If only there were a system that merged the best features of representative democracy with the best features of direct democracy. Oh yeah, there already is. It's called liquid democracy. Liquid democracy allows voters to give and revoke representative power dynamically. So if you like your elected representative and trust them enough to make the right decision, you can just entrust your vote with them and let them cast it as they see fit. But if you don't trust your representative, or if you disagree with your rep about certain issues, you can temporarily or permanently revoke their representation and cast your vote directly for yourself. Let's go back to the office example where you elected Chris as your team leader. Next week, you'll be having a company picnic, and there's been a huge debate over what flavor of ice cream to purchase. Now, you usually trust Chris enough for the day-to-day decisions, but this is a vital decision. So you are mortified when you find out that Chris loves chocolate ice cream, which you loathe. Under liquid democracy, you could temporarily take back your vote and cast it for the ice cream flavor that you prefer. Now, your favorite flavor of ice cream is banana, and you'd be super happy if banana were chosen, but realistically, you know that banana is not a super popular favorite flavor, and you don't want to risk losing to chocolate. Because this is a first-past-the-post voting system, you're forced to play it safe and vote for boring, but not too terrible vanilla. By default, as an elected team leader, Chris usually has 10 votes to cast, one for himself, and one for each of the other 9 members of his team. But by taking back your vote, you've reduced Chris's total vote strength from 10 to 9. The election comes up and Chris casts 9 of his 10 votes for chocolate, and you cast your single vote for vanilla. The results are in, and thanks to the fact that you and a few other chocolate haters were able to participate directly in this incredibly important decision and shift your votes to vanilla, vanilla won. Hey. Well, at least chocolate didn't win, but the overwhelming majority of the office is just kind of okay with vanilla. Vanilla is, after all, the beige of ice cream flavors. So nobody's super happy, but nobody's miserable, so hooray, I guess? But what if we combined liquid democracy with the Borda count? And here's what your ballot would look like, and here's what the results look like under this ranked voting system. A stunning victory for banana, your favorite flavor. And look at all of those happy faces. Almost everyone is more satisfied than they were in the first-past-the-post voting system. Why? Because in our office, nobody hated banana. Some people loved it, and a lot of people at least liked it. Everyone was satisfied with it. That made it a very strong candidate for a Borda count voting system. And that's what we should want, right? Rather than having to choose between 2 bland flavors that a lot of people really hate, we have an interesting turnout that everyone is at the very least satisfied with. Now, a major criticism of this kind of voting is that it might be overly complex, to which I say, are you kidding me? Well, we have things like computers and blockchain technology now, you silly goose. I mean, maybe back when everyone wore powdered wigs and data was transmitted by literal horses, this would have been unworkable, but times have changed. We could totally make this system work today, and it's a much better use for blockchain technology than friggin' bitcoins. Democracy is cool, but not in its current form. But we can make it better. So, let's do that. Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Much has been written about the misrule and the cruel tyranny of this same King John. But it may be claimed with justice that much of the discontent of his reign stemmed from earlier times.